Hi, today I'm going to be talking about a new hard surface modeling workflow that's really been working well for me. I've been using Facegroups and Hide, and this has just sort of changed how I think about hard surface modeling. So I want to share that with you. I have a model here that I made inside Nomad, and a lot of the detail work, if I zoom in here, this trim work here, this is all done using Facegroups and using the Hide tool, also mask and extract, excuse me. So I'll talk about some other things as well. There's a lot of array for the brickwork, as well as the blinds. Even the building, the second and third stories are a repeating array. I'll talk about some of those things. I may even throw at the end, just talk about some of the wood texture that I have for the flooring and some of the lighting. This video is not going to be me showing you how to rebuild this building. I just want to show you the fundamental techniques used to build anything you want, with this just sort of as our reference. I'm going to start by coming up to the scene menu. I'm going to hit add. We're going to add a plane, and I'm just going to turn the gizmo and drag this over a bit because that's where our building is, and I know it's going to be blocked by our building if I need to turn that back on. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is flip this upright because we're going to be making a doorway. So I have my snap turned on over here, set to 90 degrees. I'm going to grab the red rotation handle and just pull down once. And now I'm going to come up to my camera, set it to front. I'm going to come down to wireframe here and tap wireframe, turn it on. If you don't see that icon, come up to this settings menu, and under your add shortcuts, it's right here, wireframe. If it's missing, that means you just need to tap it and turn it on. A plane by default is a 64 by 64 grid, so meaning 64 squares along the X and along the Y. And if you want to confirm that, you come up to the three-dot menu here, and you can look under topology and this number value right here, 64. For the building that I made, I doubled that. I made it 128 just because I wanted more fidelity. I wanted to do finer and smaller details. But for this purpose, I think we're fine just using 64. I'm also going to clone this. I want to make a comparison to the way that maybe a lot of you are currently making hard surface edits. I need to validate both of these planes, by the way. So come up here, hit validate, tap the other one, validate it. I'm going to turn off the wireframe for just a moment, and I'm going to switch to my trim tool. And on the left tool strip on this side, I'm going to make sure that I have my rectangle selected. So I want to make a doorway. I'm just going to drag up something like this, and then I'm going to let go. So just starting off quickly, if we zoom in, there are some problem areas right here. It's not a full 90-degree corner. There's sort of this chamfer happening. That's only one of the issues. To resolve that, I would have to increase my mesh density. The biggest problem overall is when I turn wireframe back on, is that when I use the trim tool, by default, it will voxel remesh to make that hole and the rest of it. So let's zoom in a little bit. If you squint your eyes, you can see that there actually is a 64 by 64 grid sitting behind this spider web of voxel remesh. And really what I want if I'm doing hard surface modeling is a lot of straight lines. This is not the direction I suggest, but you'd be doing more work to try to get it back to a clean grid like you're seeing over here on the left. So I'm going to just say right off the bat, trim is not the workflow for hard surface modeling. It can work. I've seen it work, but you have to do a really high mesh count. So I'm going to delete that. Oops, wrong one. Let's delete this one. Okay. The other way to do it, let me bring in a cube. Let's bring this over. And let's just decrease this to be sort of like a wall thickness. And I'm going to clone it. And I'm going to shrink this to be sort of a door shape and bring this down. And let's give it some thickness, bury it in the wall. So now, traditionally, this is how a lot of people would be doing their Boolean subtract. So I need to select both objects, but hide the visibility. Oops, I need to first hide the visibility and unhide the visibility. So make visible the thing that you want to keep and make invisible the thing you want to get rid of. But you need to check mark both boxes or both objects. And then up here, you just need to hit Boolean. Let's take a look at this. Turn off our wireframe and forget the wireframe issue. This is a very usable method for doing hard surface modeling here. So let's move on to the thing that I have found works really well for me. So we have Facegroups and we have Hide, and you have to be working with a validated object to use these things. So if I wanted to make the same door cut I don't necessarily have to use face groups. I could go straight to my hide tool and just draw. I need to make sure that I have rectangle selected, and I could just draw a doorway and let go. It's not a fully punched through hole yet. There's still a grid. You can still see grid lines. Hopefully that's coming through on your end. But in the door opening area, I still see a wireframe mesh. I can get rid of that just by hitting delete up here. So if I hit that, I've committed the shape. There's no longer a mesh. This is the true shape of my object now. If I undo, there's also the option for split. And what split does is it retains the cutout piece on a new layer. So let me hit split. So here I have a layer now for the door and a layer for the wall. And if I open my settings or my layers, you can see these two shapes or those shapes. So that's handy because I do want the door. I want the cutout shape to build as my door. The reason why you might use face groups in this workflow is, let me back it up. And here, like, you could easily just use hide and get the job done. Here's where I use face groups, and that's sort of for planning. Let me open this. So I've enabled face groups. If I come over to the left tool strip, I'm going to click on patch. Right now we have this magenta color. So it's a single plane. It only gets one patch color. If you were to bring in a cube with 6 faces and you open patch, you would get 6 different colors because face group attempts to assign a unique color to each face of the cube. So here, let's open patch and let's add a new color. So this lets me draw a region. And what face groups is good for is creating selectable regions within a single piece of geometry. So there's a couple ways that you can draw on it. Dot, which is just a paintbrush, lasso, polygon. And if you scroll, you've got 2 more. And it's funny because I think rectangle is one of the most useful ones and it's buried. Rectangle and ellipse. So let's use the rectangle. Scroll back up, make sure I have my green selected. I'm going to just draw a door. So we have that. And I can also switch to hide, pick that door. I just tapped on the green color and it automatically removes it. But I could do that with hide by itself. I don't need face groups to do that. But here's why I like using face groups is because I come over to tap face groups again, come over. I'm going to create a new color. You can pick that color and change it if you want. I'm going to make it a little hotter. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and I want to make a frame, like a door frame. So I'm going to try to have a 2 pixel border around my entire door. So there, the green area is now my door frame. So I like to use face groups as a way to sort of pre-plan. This way I can look at it and make any adjustments before I start cutting. It's sort of that, I don't know, in the woodworking world, measure twice, cut once. You kind of want to make sure things are aligned properly before you start just go cutting things up. I don't necessarily have to make new colors every time I want to draw a new shape. And there actually is just a tool to do that. You could come down to this face group button and turn it on. And now every time I draw, it's going to auto assign a new color for me. I don't want that on for me personally because I want to control everything. So I have magenta as my wall color, green as my door trim, and then this aqua color is sort of my door. I am going to add a new color for like a window. So let's make a window here. Again, maybe I'll pick a color that's a little hotter than that, yellow. There's times when I may actually assign a group of colors. So I want to trim around my window as well. I'm going to keep the same trim color, which is my green. I'm going to choose my rectangle. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do a 2 pixel window frame. So the nice thing about that is when I go to my hide tool, if I tap on green, it's just automatically going to adopt anything that's green and hide it. I can tap again and it'll invert it. If I tap a 3rd time, it's completely gone. And then if I tap a 4th time, everything's back. I use face groups for the reason of I like to draw out a plan before I start cutting things up. And then here's the next step. So we've made a plane. We've decided what our grid size is. It's 64 by 64 currently. We turned on face group. We validated it. We turned on face groups. We sort of drew a map of the things that we want to cut out. And now we're going to switch to the hide tool. I'm going to start with just the door. I just tapped on the aqua color. It hides it. I'm going to use split so that I can keep the door. So I'm going to hit split. And now I'm going to open my layers menu. And I want to show you that I've got everything else and the door currently. So if I just select this, hit solo, there's my door. solo, there's the rest of it. So I want to keep doing this. I'm going to select, I have my wall selected. I want to switch to, turn this off. I want to now pick my window. I'm going to hit split again. If I hit delete, remember that just commits the whole, but you don't get the piece that was cut out. So I'm going to keep hitting split because I want the window as well. Open my menu here. We've got our wall, window, and door now. So back to the wall, we have one thing we want to split again. So I'm going to pick the trim and I'm going to hit split. And now let's see, so now we have the wall with no trim, no window, no door. We have the frame, the window, and the door. Okay, this is exactly what we want. The very important thing is we are working on a grid, and you may feel like that's limiting, like it's too chunky. Remember, that comes down to how dense your grid is. You could do the 128 like I did to get thinner. It's like subdividing many times. You could do a really, really dense mesh, but you'd have to deal with like painting you'd have to zoom in and sort of paint your pixels, but you can do it. I'm doing this very rudimentary right now on a 64 by 64 grid. It might feel like Legos or something like that, but that's a positive for the moment. So I have all the pieces I need. The next step would be, let's figure out how to extrude these shapes and give it depth. So for my wall, I'm going to hit mask. So I've enabled mask. If you take your finger, don't tap on the geometry, tap on the empty space around your geometry, and you can see it gets darker. If I tap again on the outside, I can toggle on and off. The way that you know that your mask is active is it gets darker, but you also see this clear all button. Now I need to come up to my mask settings, so open this menu, and there's going to be a few parameters that I'm going to walk you through before we fully commit. Turn on preview. That's the most important thing here. Preview is on. And now let's turn to the side, and that's got to be pretty revealing what we're going to do with all these things and how you could take any shape and create a very, the mesh that's still maintained here. It's so clean that I can just keep this process going. I can keep selecting. So let's decide a thickness. I like to sort of eyeball it. And then when I like something, I tap into the number value and I just try to round it off. 0.03. Let's do 0.05. It's 0.05. And let's tap and see what that looks like. We're going to go with 0.05. I actually want to hide this one real quick or delete it. Okay. And there's a second factor before you commit that I'd like you to think about too, and it's the edge loop. So that means on this side, how many cuts do you want? Do you want 0, 1, 2, 3? So what I'm looking for are squares. I'm going to try to keep it as square as I can. Maybe just 2 works for me. And then select shell as your closing action. And then let's hit extract. And there you go. You have thickness now to that wall. As part of extract, because you've done shell, it creates one extra layer, or it saves the layer. You can decide whether or not that's useful to you. But here's the flat version of our shape. And then the new version, the extracted version, has the ext extract attached to the layer name. And that's your thick, your 3D, more three-dimensional shape now. So you can decide whether or not you want to keep the original. You can hide it. You can just delete it altogether. Now we're just going to go through and decide thicknesses for all of these pieces. So the trim, if I turn back on my face groups, for the trim, the green parts, I want that to be thicker than the wall by just a small amount. And the other decision I have, it's very flush on this side. Do I want it extruded inward to the interior as well as outward for the exterior? My answer currently is, yeah, I'm going to do that. So I need to think about the width of my trim. So we're going to select I'm going to solo this. We're going to extract this now. So we did 0.05 for the wall thickness. So we need to enable mask. We need to come up to our mask settings, which is open now. I also need to tap. Now that I have mask active, I need to tap, like I said, outside. I'm tapping on this area, not on the geometry, but with my finger, I'm just tapping over here until it goes dark. And I see the clear all now. I know that it's selected. I'm going to come up to my mask settings. And here I have 0.05. I want about 0.01 extruding forward and a 0.01 extruding backwards. So we're going to do 0.07. 0.07. And we can just tap in the hide area to see the difference. And I probably want to unsolo this and see roughly how far it's extruding past. So you can see sort of the peach color is the wall. So remember, we're going to move this so that it's also extruding inward. So I'm good with that. Now let's figure out our edge loops. So I'm going to move to 3 because that looks square to me more than it does there. If I go one higher, 4, I could go 4. I'm going to go 3, and let's just hit extract again. So let's unsolo. Let's turn off our wireframe. This is what we have so far. On this side, it's going to be flush. You won't even see anything. And I want to move that. I want to move our trim. Oops, I have my mask still selected. I want to move this trim. I could just eyeball it. I could come over here and then just sort of pull it to where I think it looks good. And we could be fine right there. If you want to be more exact about it, we added 0.02 to both sides. So we need to move back by 0.01 if we want it to sit center. So the way that you can get exact positioning is if you come up to your gizmo settings, your translation is your X, Y, and Z position. So I recommend grabbing the handle of the thing you want to move. And this time it's working out well. Blue handle and the blue value. Watch the blue value move as I move. So that's correct. If you were to have a line turned off, look at which handle I'm grabbing. I'm grabbing the green handle, but also pay attention to the values over here. Which one's moving? It's still the blue moving, but I am holding a green handle. So just check it before you start moving. So we need to move the blue value, and I want to do minus 0.01. And now it's perfectly extruded inward and outward to the exterior. And that's what I wanted. So this is the basis for the workflow. This is the whole workflow right now. And I hope you're enjoying the quality of the wireframe as you work, because it's super helpful. And let's come back to, if you tap on the very top right thing, you can switch from a single column to, like, I've set 3 columns in here. So when you're making selections with face group, point out the fact that even though I'm using like a rectangle shape, if I try to select just even a small part of one of the squares, it's going to always snap to the full square. Even if I just touch the tiniest corner of it, that's a plus for me. I want to work on a grid. I want it to always force me. So when you did trim, if you cut halfway into a square in the grid, it will try to cut at that halfway point. It won't go. So this is forcing us to think about the resolution we need to work at, like how dense our grid is before we start. And you could always subdivide and make it, and you could come up to this and you could go to your multi-res and hit subdivide. I don't know if you see this, but I've subdivided, and I could do this. And if I hit delete lower, then it's now a 128 by 128 grid. And I could start to work now with face groups in this way. Oops, let me make sure I've got it. Do I have it selected? The one thing to be cautious of is it's going to round just the top corners, but your selection, I'm not on the right color. Your selection will now be on a 128 by 128 grid. Undo. But what happens is it starts to round the corners. So that it's better to just figure that out right from the very beginning. The last thing I want to do for the window, we would just want to move the window. We could add thickness to it. You just decide where you want the window. I'm kind of just eyeballing that one. For the door, I want the door to be less thick than the wall. The wall was 0.05. I'm going to go to mask. I'm going to tap on the outside over here to set the mask. I'm going to go to my mask settings. Here, wall was 0.05. I'm going to do 0.03. We could just tap into the height just to see it real quick. Next thing I want to do is determine my edge. I want it square. 1 looks pretty good. I'm just going to hit extract. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the layer above is always the flat version. So you can delete that one. We just want the extruded shape. So let me unsolo that. We could turn off the wireframe and just maybe paint some of these things so we have some variation of color. The trim could be darker. The door, got a red door, just so we can, the window, maybe like a light faint blue. And you can add materials to something that's a window. You could come up to this material menu, scroll to the top. It's at opaque. I could set it to blending and then lower so you can see that I'm seeing through the window to the interior wall. You can do something like that. One fun thing to do would be to snap to the front view, select our door, hit the gizmo tool, come up here, hit pivot, zoom in a bit, drag your pivot point to the left edge. Could be the right edge too if you want. And then turn pivot off. And now you've created a hinge for your door. So I'm going to turn off snap because I want to just swing my door open. Oops, what am I doing? I think I grabbed stretch, not rotate. There you go. I have post-process on. That's probably killing my performance. There you have a door hinge. I'm gonna reset that. And we want to move that inward a little bit. So that one's at 0.3 thickness, 0.03. The wall is 0.05. So we want to move it forward by just 0.01. 0.01. That will center our door on both sides. So that is the process that I used to build the entire building structure that you saw here. Same thing. Just hide. Let me hide this one real quick. Hide that. Yeah, that is all exactly how I did the detailing here. And with the mesh on, it's fully snapped to a grid system. So everything that I showed you was how I built this bottom floor. For the bricks, let's talk about that. Let's select the sphere. I'm going to hit add a cube. Let's solo that for a second. Bring it out here. And let's shrink it down, make it a brick shape. Stretch it, shrink it a little bit here. Okay, there's our brick. I'm going to snap my camera here to left. You can even lock it. Actually, let's not lock it for a moment because the next thing you want to do, I'm going to hit validate. I'm going to come up to my scene menu, add. There's a repeaters section down here. We're going to use the array repeater. Okay. We have a value for, so there's count X, count Y, and count Z. So that means that there are 2 bricks somewhere, and there's our second one because we have a count of 2. And you won't have access to the size fields when the count is 1. You have to have at least a count of 2. So now I can lower my distance. There's another very important toggle, and that's fit inside. Do you want the count of bricks to fit inside your current distance? So if I leave it on, every time I add a brick, it will be within the distance that I have set for size X. If I turn off fit inside, now when I go to add more, it's going to grow outward. This is what I want for we actually don't want this direction anyways. We're going to work with Y and Z. So I'm going to move to 2 on, and let's set this to 0.05. Let's see where that is. Okay, so we have that. I like to just sort of round it to, okay, 0.08. We want to move to 2 on, let's do 0.3. Okay, now we can bring that down. Let's look at this, 0.15. Nope, 0.16. Okay, so let's say that is the right spacing that we like. Now with fit inside turned off, I can continue to grow my grid. So if you want a more modern brick layout, this could be it. You could be done. This is how you could build. But if you're looking for that offset brick pattern, like a very traditional brick pattern, then we need to create gaps between our vertical stack. So one way to do that is to tap on the offset and double our existing height, and then maybe add just a little bit more than our double. So I'm going to do, you can do math in the fields here. So you can do plus, minus, multiply, divide. This is true like Photoshop or maybe even Microsoft Word. A lot of programs let you do this. If you want to multiply, you do the asterisk times 2. That'll give us a gap. We actually want to maybe add 0.65 just for a little more height. So here's where we want to land. I'm going to come up to this is our brick array 2. Collapse that folder, hit clone. Okay, and now when I drag down, I have a copy of the array that we are already working with, and I'm eyeballing it. You could figure out the math for this. So this looks good. I just need to now drag along this direction to get the offset. And this is how I made the brick pattern. And now when you look at me growing this count upward, maybe not upward, but to the right. So I did 11 so it's 9 and 11, 9 for green, 11 for blue. If I select our other array, then I have 9, but I need to go to 11, and I soloed it. That's what happened. So you can see I just need to match that. And that's how I did the brick pattern. So there's one more step. You need to validate. You don't have to validate, but if you want to start painting the bricks, let's paint them a brick color to begin with. It's a little bit of that color somewhere in there. Let's pick our other array and paint that as well. And we'll talk about the choices that you have to make for when you validate. So with one of the red array layers selected, you want to hit validate. You get 3 choices. You can do join children. And when I hit yes, all of the bricks become one solid piece of geometry. They're going to be joined together. If I do keep instances, it will break all the individual bricks apart as separate objects, but there will be one master. The original master object will be, every instance of the master objects will be updated. So if I make a change to the original master brick, like I round the corners, all the instances will inherit those properties and be rounded as well. If you want to have each brick be broken apart and also not have a master, you want to use uninstance. So I'm going to use uninstance on both of these. I'm going to hit array 2, validate, and use uninstance yes. I want to do that because I want to paint them. So I pre-painted them, but sometimes there's variation in brick color. So I'm going to just select one here, just one. I'm going to sort of lighten it. So let's pick a brick. Let's kind of paint it like a different red. I'm not saying go one by one, but this is the process at which I sort of, you can pick it and you can make, I mean, I'm being extreme here, but you could do all kinds of things. So I could do like a darker, duller color. The way that I actually ended up doing it was just kind of randomly. I like to pick the ones, but I ended up randomly coming through and just check boxing at random a bunch of different ones and then hitting paint all. And you can see it's sort of at random, I started painting different, and that just gives it a more realistic feel. If you look at mine, I've got some random, very subtle changes, a little bit darker, a little bit brighter, a little more orange on some of them. That just added to the vibe of what a true brick wall looks like. The blinds are also an array. I'll just tap on this and solo it. It's literally a slat. I could have made it thinner actually. I just did this, add an array repeater just on the vertical. I also added inside of that array, let me find it, many levels deep. I also had, is it not showing it? Unsolo. All I did was add, in the same array, you can add multiple objects. I had the slat and I had 2 little cylinders here, and those are just getting repeated. And then when you play with the array, it almost feels like you're pulling up the blinds for real. You can drop them. I like seeing the light get blocked out on the windowsill. It's kind of cool. So that's how I achieved that. For the lights, I have 2 lights in the scene, and then I'll show you just this other little trick I did. So here are the 2 lights. I have this first floor, which is just like a ceiling light. The thing I like the most about this is the light spill onto the sidewalk here. So this is almost, I would assume it's just the default spotlight. I don't think I even changed the intensity. Really, I just played with this sort of cone shape. And then here you can see where I started to play with how much light spill I have. There's an option for softness, which normally you have to go in here and play with the softness, but you can play with this blue control. This is also sort of fall off. It's the softness control, but it's kind of like how much fall off. And the only other thing to be aware of is like if you accidentally turn off shadow, you have this light that sort of penetrates the wall, like this very unnatural. So yeah, I just have shadows on. That's it. This is probably by mistake. I realized that I only have 1 second story. You'll see that I turned off all my lights in the scene and I still have lights sort of shining. This is where I've done some sort of like Hollywood magic. It's really not that much magic, but let me show you. I have this cube shape, which first I want to turn it off just to show you this. So if I hide it, this is probably by mistake. I should have had like a 3rd story light too. I think originally I had it as part of the array and then I forgot to include it in the array. I have to uncheck this so we not get this weird. So that's the light. It's okay, not quite as interesting. The other shape that I've introduced sort of leaks through all the louvers in the shutter or the blinds, and that is just let me select it. That is just a box, and I went up to the material here. I have it set to additive. If I put it back to opaque, I also had it set as always unlit. If I uncheck that, it's just a cube, and when you set it to additive, you get that, and when you set it to unlit, you get this glowing object. So if I unhide or show everything, let me show you what it looks like. It's just this. So all I did was scale it to the point where it was sort of breaking through, and I just kind of eyeballed it. And I was like, oh, that looks cool. So that is all I did for the lights. Both of these are spotlights, the two lights that I did have, and they're default. Also, I had, it's not a plane. You could use a plane. I think I just took a cube and smashed it really far down. I might as well have used a plane. The way that you get the texture on there is I found an image, a tile. It's just a wood floor square image. And then if you select your plane or cube, you can scroll down under this materials menu down to the textures. This box, if you don't have a texture, will be blank. You just click on that. It's on the same row as color. So I'm choosing the color option. This will also be blank, and then you just hit open. And then you can go to your photos and select the photo that you downloaded. And you'll have a few properties for controlling. So if you tap on this, you have the X and Y. So if you pay attention to the flooring, you'll see it moving. And you just decide what you want. You can also set scale, just kind of decide what plank size, what feels realistic. So that's all I did. I would make sure that if you do have, for wood flooring, it doesn't have to be a perfectly tiled image, but be aware that if you have it off, then you can only sort of move it so far before you start to see blank. So you can see there's some blank space on over here, but if I turn repeat on, then it'll basically be this infinite scroll kind of thing. So that's really all I did for that. Same thing for the sidewalk. I just found a concrete texture, and I'm not even in love with this one, but I threw it in there. So that's really the only extra bonus stuff. I started to make an air conditioning unit sticking out of but didn't even put a fan in it. I got part way through and decided I should just start teaching this. I don't think anyone's going to really care if I make a fan. So that's it. I hope you got a lot out of that. There's probably a lot of things I didn't cover. If you have any questions or you just want to know anything else about how I made this, just leave me a comment and I'll try to follow up. All right. Thanks for watching. Keep making things, and I'll see you next time.